afternoon. We're so glad you're here. My name is Deanne Schiffler, and I'm the editor of American Cranes and Transport magazine. American Cranes and Transport, or ACT, as you may know it, is SC&RA's official publication covering the North American crane, rigging, and specialized transportation sector. When Beth O'Quinn asked me to moderate this session, I agreed, naturally, because asking questions is what I do every day. Sometimes all day. Today, our panel session will address lessons learned, building company culture amidst transitional and generational changes. As our industry ages, its leaders are getting younger. How do we build and sustain successful corporate cultures? To say the least of other challenges like succession planning, hiring quality workers, keeping workers engaged, and all of this amid the backdrop of a global pandemic. Does a strong company culture just evolve, or is it something you can create, guide, and improve? With the transitional and generational changes in the crane rigging and specialized transportation industry, company leadership must pay close attention to transparency, employee accountability, and recognition. The SC&RA Workshop Planning Committee has assembled a panel of crane industry professionals who will discuss the lessons they have learned and the best practices they recommend to help you nudge forward your company culture and overall success. Our panelists represent the leadership of three highly successful crane and rigging companies. Diana Holt, CEO of Wilkerson Crane Rental, based in Bonner Springs, Kansas. Kate Lamson, Director of Marketing for Lamson International, based in Kennewick, Washington. And Sandy Steffen, Vice President of Steffen Industries, based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. These three dynamic young women represent a new brand of leadership for our industry, the future of our industry. They are smart, articulate, and committed to making their companies the best they can be. And did I say smart? Let me reiterate. These women are very sharp. They are all in. So who are these women, and how did they achieve their current status in their companies? This is a question I ask in almost every interview I do in the magazine. So let's start with the same question for everybody. Kate, what's your story? How did you get in the crane industry? Also, can you please provide a quick overview of your company, each of you?
Well, thank you for asking, Deanne. And first of all, I'd like to thank the SC&RA for putting together this panel today, and thank you to all of you for attending. It's my honor to be here and serve alongside these incredible women in the industry. To tell you a little bit about myself, as Deanne mentioned, I'm the PR and Communications Director of Lamson International. I'm also the HR Director and one of the owners of Lamson International. We are a third-generation, family-owned and operated heavy lift and heavy haul corporation, started in 1946 by my grandparents, Neil and Billie Jane Lamson. What once started out as a small crane and drayage business is now one of the industry leaders in the world. We have offices throughout the U.S., Canada, and Australia, and we employ over 300 people. We also have over 400 pieces of equipment in our fleet, and I'm very proud to say that this year we are celebrating our 75th year of doing business. And in those 75 years, we've worked in over 55 countries worldwide. For me, I knew that I wanted to get involved in the family business at a very early age. I remember driving through the yards on Saturdays with my dad and checking out the equipment, seeing what was being loaded out on Monday, and talking with the guys that were working on the weekends. I also have very fond memories of hosting customers in our home. My sister and I learned early on the value of good etiquette and taking care of our customers. I also have great memories of working summers and Christmas breaks in high school and college. For anyone out there in the audience who works in a family business, you know what it's like to wear a lot of different hats, and that you jump in whenever and wherever possible and you do whatever task is needed at the time. For me, I could be in a hard hat and boots in the morning giving a tour of our shop facilities. By the afternoon, I'm answering some questions for an industry publication, and in the evenings, I'm in a dress and heels representing the family and the company and the community. So it's been a wonderful experience thus far, and I look forward to carrying the tradition forward.
Thanks, Kate. I do remember a story you told me once that really early on you had a particularly interesting title.
I did. My grandmother, Billie Jane Lamson, for those of you who might have known her, she was a very strong woman, and she gave me the nickname Chairman of the Board at age 5.
Okay, Diana, tell me your story.
Well, unlike Kate, I am new to the industry. I've been in the industry for 8 years. I started out as I went to school for industrial design and was a freelance carpenter. When I was younger, I actually got kicked out of shop class and still became a carpenter. So apparently I like a challenge. But pretty much how I got in the industry was one of my freelance jobs that I was working on was at Wilkerson Crane Rental. And it was, at that time, it was owned by Oldcastle, which owned APAC. It was bought several times. So when I was in renovating the office, we got the news that that company was going out of business. And my husband, Jeff Holt, had been an operator there since he was 18. And my father-in-law had been there for so many years before that. I don't even know. So we had a big history already with that company. And it was just something that my husband had decided that he's like, I would really like to have a crane. I am not going to go work for a competitor. And in that process, I was trying to start a different business. So I had a meeting with a financial advisor. And when I was meeting with him, I had just asked, so what would this take to get a crane? And he told me one thing. He said, you don't want to go get one crane. You want to get all the cranes you can. You want to maintain the market that Wilkerson had already built. And so I went home and really was laughing about that because we were a paycheck to paycheck house. It was $2,000 in my account at the end of the month was a good month. And so in this process, I was like, there's no way I'm going to get a crane. But I put a business plan together. I had to Google how to do that. And 100 pages later, I was able to take a business plan and I presented it to 2 different banks. And one of them just said no right out really quickly. And the other one entertained the offer and kept asking more questions and ended up getting a loan for that. And so since then, it's just grown from there. So,
well, tell me about Wilkerson. Where are you today?
Where are we today? Well, we started with 5 employees. We started with 8 pieces of equipment. And and 2 of those were cranes, and that was it. And then so now we have 120 pieces of equipment. We have a little over 30 that are cranes, and we have 70 employees, and we just moved into a new facility, and we had originally started in my basement. And so it was my basement, and we rented a yard, and we had a little tiny 13 by 13 building, like a little cell tower building that we had gutted, and that's what we kept at the yard for all the guys to meet every morning, and we just had like temporary power drop to it, and so that's where we've grown in 8 years.
That's wonderful. So, Sandy, how did you get started in this business?
Hi, thanks, Deanne. I'm Sandy Steffen from Steffen Industries. I'm the vice president. We're located right near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Our company got its start by my dad, his name is Bud Steffen. If you've ever met any of our staff around Pittsburgh, he's kind of a legend. He got his start. He was working in the steel mill. He was a talented welder and decided that he could do things a little bit smarter and a little bit easier than he was able to in his career with the steel mill, and decided that they don't offer any benefits or any pay on the inside that he can't make for himself on the outside, and thought, if it doesn't work, I'll just go back. So he eventually purchased a 1965, I believe it was, Coca-Cola truck that he retrofitted into a roving welding truck. I understand on the Lincoln side that was a pretty big deal. He was the first one to be able to accomplish that, but he traveled all around the Mon Valley and around the Pittsburgh area, repairing tools, repairing frames, whatever it needed. That eventually segued into larger scale steel fabrication, steel erection, and necessitated some crane purchases, obviously, to be able to set the steel and set the trusses that were being fabricated. And then he's been very good at being able to pivot with the market. Around mid-2000s, it became very clear that more machinery moving, manufacturing, process equipment installation kind of became more of the bread and butter. So the crane fleet got smaller, but the forklift fleet got much larger. So that's how we ended up where we are now. Is primary is food and beverage, process equipment, medical equipment. Still have our fabrication shop that Bud goes and plays in every once in a while. I was asked to get involved in the business. This was kind of by accident. I really had not been involved. About August 2018, I was asked to come help kind of reorganize just the office and streamline some processes. The same person had been there for a long time, kind of had exceeded her capabilities. What I noticed within my first few days there, that this business was no longer the little business along the river. The amount of revenue that was coming in, the transaction amounts, the amount of equipment, the number of employees, it had far surpassed what I even realized that it was. I'm not quite sure everyone who was there realized how big the company had grown. Just kind of by nature, I'm solutions oriented. I like to, if I see a problem, I'll fix it and move on. And I did encounter just a mountain of problems. You name it, an issue that a business could possibly have, it had it. Kind of the issue is the business looked very good on paper. Financially, it looked very strong, and a lot of times that's the only frame of reference used in decision making. However, internally, it was chaos. It was turmoil. It was an unbelievable amount of just wasted time, which of course equated to lost money. Turnover was extremely high. Morale was low. None of these issues seemed to be insurmountable, though. I just really thought that it had good bones. So after a few months there, I had a conversation with my dad, and we agreed that he wanted me to stay on, and I intentionally did not want a title. And I wanted to be autonomous, but have the authority to put some wheels in motion to be able to make the business be the best that it could be. So there was a little bit of a debate about that, going back and forth, and I finally agreed. 3 years now, it's been quite a roller coaster. Our family has been through a lot, but I kept plowing ahead with every issue that we faced. In fact, I quit at least once, maybe twice. No, it definitely was twice. But it's kind of what would happen is the next day, just, act like it didn't happen. And somebody would call and say, hey, where are you at? So here we are. Luckily, my dad's been very embracing of everything that I've been able to bring to the company, and we've seen it do just a complete 180. It was a lot of trial and error, just some internal issues that had to get dealt with, but very proud of the company that it's become.
I just love these stories. So my next question is for the entire panel as well. What are the challenges you have faced in ascending the leadership ladder of your company? This time we're going to start with Sandy.
Well, that's a great issue to bring up. The challenges. So I really anticipated the traditional challenges once I became established with my position within the company. I knew that there would be some pushback. I came in, I was younger. I had more education, and I had a lot to offer with the experience that I had. So I knew that it wouldn't be exactly well received, and I was ready for that. I knew there would be the assumption of nepotism. Full disclosure, I'm an only child, and the daddy's little girl comments were thrown around quite often. And I didn't find that to be an issue either. What turned out to be the biggest problem is the person who was kind of the number two under my dad. My dad was actually in a state of semi-retirement, so his involvement in the business was, as needed. He still would pop into the office, but he had a thumb on the pulse always of the finances, but the day-to-day business was someone else's responsibility. What was happening, and the challenge I had that I didn't know at the time, is that person who I was there to support and make their life easier and make their job easier, more time off, things like that, was really pushing a pretty strong narrative that I was a troublemaker and that I had no idea what I was doing, that it was just nepotism at its finest, and I was making everyone's job more difficult. So I was already swimming upstream, not realizing the attitudes that were from the inside out aimed my direction. I didn't deserve that, but I didn't know I was working against it. So it took some time to smooth that out.
Okay, we're going to come back to that daddy's little girl comment. Let's go with you, Diana. What challenges have you seen?
I would say that every step has pretty much been a challenge for me. They didn't teach me anything about the legal side of a company at art school, so I missed out on some of those lessons. So what have been my challenges is setting up the structure of a company. It's come down to I've done every part. I've done OSHA, Department of Transportation, the IFTA filings, employee records, contracts. I mean, you name it, every single step of this industry I've had to go through and learn. So that has been it's something that you learn every day. Every time you get a new job or you get a different contract, it's just one more thing that you're learning. So those are all challenges. And I think now the biggest challenges is now that we've grown so much, it's putting other people in place to do the jobs that I've been doing and knowing when it's a good time to just outsource these things or if it's time to hire someone full-time in-house. So that's kind of been the challenge, is just getting my process and procedures set up for working even in an office environment, employee handbooks, just every little detail that a lot of larger companies already have in place. So
kind of feel your way through the dark.
Yep.
Okay, Kate, I'd like you to answer that question, but I'd like to start with, did you ever have an issue with being the boss's daughter?
I sure did. I think that, growing up, there's this perception in family business, this perception that the kids have this sense of entitlement, that everything is handed to them, that they don't have to work hard, they get promoted up through the ranks. And for anyone who knows my father, Bill Lamson, that's not true. We were taught at a very early age to keep our heads down, to work hard, to earn the respect of everyone around us, and to know what our business is and how it functions. So as I've come up through the ranks in the organization and I've learned, I've done my best to know my business and understand the people that I work with in the industry that I work in.
Okay. Well, staying with you, Kate, let's discuss the succession plan. With 75 years of a company being in existence, which is amazing, with the third generation of family leadership now in place, how did Lamson International navigate succession planning? What is your advice to those in this room who are dealing with this, approaching this process?
So that's an excellent question. I think succession planning is very important for any organization. If you have plans to pass on that company to anyone coming up in the family or to any key employees, I think there's a number of points to be made. First, ensure that your next generation has passion and loyalty for the business, that they're invested fully. And that's primarily to secure the health and well-being of the organization, to foster a smooth generational change, and to set your company up for success for perpetuity. I would also say create opportunities of growth and learning early on and foster that, and make sure that the individual knows that they're the successor for that department, and have those conversations early on. Have annual meetings with your key employees or stakeholders and the family members. Make sure everyone is on the same page and there's no surprises. I would also encourage you to keep the lines of communication open, especially if you're in a family business. And my advice would be keep business and keep the personal out of the workplace. Finally, I would say recognize threats. I think we're all really great at looking at external threats, whether it might be a competitor or an unhappy customer or a global pandemic that forces you to pivot. But I think that we should all be aware of internal threats. If you recognize one, identify it and eradicate it as soon as possible. Otherwise, you could jeopardize the success of your business going forward.
So who are the family members that are in your company now?
So currently there's my father, Bill Lamson, who is the president and CEO. There's myself, and there's my brother, Peter Lamson.
Okay, great. Okay, my next question is for you, Diana. So with Wilkerson Crane, you went from a very small company to a mid-sized company that you're now running. How has the business evolved?
Well, I kind of touched on that a little bit in the beginning, just about the size. But not only have we grown in size, we've grown in our different industries that we work in. So we've constantly had to modify what we do. We've had to take what we do every day and know that it was successful and we do it great, but now how can we do this on a larger scale and a larger, job size? We were on wind farms versus just cell towers. And so being able to kind of make it through that process, we've evolved. It's really just been through our employees, hiring the right people, and just.
So what industries do you mainly serve?
Right now we're in a large part of wind, but we do tons with the railroad, we do cellular, we do tilt-ups. We have a little bit in each industry, so we're pretty fortunate in Kansas City to kind of be able to hit all the markets.
That's great. Okay, Sandy, we touched on this a little bit earlier. Navigating legal issues is often a learn-as-you-go process. What tips can you give our audience when it comes to dealing with a major legal problem?
Sure, that's a great question. One of the big things that I would like to just reiterate what Kate said is if you do have a threat that's internal, don't let it fester. Please deal with it as soon as possible. At our company, we went through something that it was not comfortable to go through. We survived and decided that we were going to thrive, and that's what we have done. But it wasn't without a lot of hard work and a lot of emotions being involved. So if anything we can pass on as that piece of advice is please, if something doesn't feel right or somebody's behavior doesn't feel right, acknowledge it and deal with it. Don't let it just fester. On the legal end, obviously I won't get into the details of that situation. I'm pretty sure my attorney would prefer it that way. So I'll try to keep this as general as possible. Just on the legal end, as long as it's not something that involves an employee issue that would need to be strictly confidential, when your company is involved, whether it's an issue with a customer, it's insurance, it's copyright contracts, anytime that your employees hear that there is a lawsuit, lawsuits are terrifying. They're typically a pretty poor use of resources. It's a time suck and they're expensive. But what you want to do is mitigate any damage to your employee morale. You don't want them to start to think, is the company in trouble? Do I need to start looking for another job? It can really do a lot of damage very quickly. So in my experience, what we did is made sure that we involved our employees, sat them down, explained to them, hey, this is what's going on. And just because I know it's very unfamiliar territory for them, we made sure that they understood the process. They understood the steps. This is what's coming next. That worked for several reasons. There was a lot of issues in part of the discovery that we had to navigate that I didn't have the details for, neither did my father because he wasn't on job sites every day, but my staff was. So what would happen is we would revisit this even for a few minutes a week. It was nothing that was a time constraint, but the piece of information that Monday seemed it was just irrelevant and it had no weight, all of a sudden, 3 weeks later, it had a lot of significant weight, and it helped just put another piece of the puzzle together. So we kind of had a little bit of the staff buy-in, but what it did, too, in the community is it completely just it dealt with the rumor mill itself, because with our staff knowing what's going on, they weren't trying to be armchair attorneys amongst themselves. And they also really took the high road. Anytime the situation came up in conversation, they held their heads high and say, I really don't have anything to say. And just let it go with that. Just keeping them involved, though, and making sure that the unknown was minimized, it really helped their confidence in the company, and we've really rallied together as a team because of it.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about corporate culture. Let's talk about Lamson. How has company culture played a role in Lamson's longevity?
I would say that company culture has been very important for the success of our business. My grandparents started the business. It's been family and operated ever since. But not just running it as a family business, but treating your employees as if they're family as well. My grandparents' philosophy was treat your people well and never lose a customer. And I still believe that philosophy today. I believe that if you have happy people working with you, it'll help keep your doors open and your business profitable.
Okay, Sandy, what advice can you give on establishing a business plan, sticking to it, and then also measuring your success?
Sure. Business planning, we all know, is very important. I'm sure that we've all heard this terminology thrown around. Problem is with small businesses, it's very difficult to find the time. especially even like Diane's case, you get involved so quickly that you have to do the work sometimes before you have the structure in place. So sometimes we are just playing catch up. So how many people here were small business, 20 employees and under? Okay, so we have a few. One of the things that I always encourage small businesses to do is you don't have to look at business planning as some huge project that seems just very overwhelming. Break it apart into small pieces, something as simple as a strategic plan, just making sure that you get on paper where you want your company to go, where it's been, and who's going to be responsible for helping drive that. One of the other things that's a very useful tool is a SWOT analysis, really basic, but what it does is get just a large whiteboard, a giant Post-it note, whatever it takes. Get something in writing, get it in front of your face so you can't ignore it. You get your SWOT analysis with your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And once you see those, a clear path starts to emerge. They're just very basic principles. It doesn't cost any money to deploy some of these plans. But what happens is the more you engage, again, your employees, this is not just for the people in offices, but engage your team. It doesn't have to be just for businesses either. It can be for maybe your department within a larger business. All the same principles will apply. But the more buy-in that you have from your employees, the more likely you are to start to accomplish some of your goals. A really easy tactic that you can do, so you can see results immediately. You know, we all love immediate gratification. So sometimes these very large, long-term processes, they get thrown by the wayside because you don't see results quickly. So a quick way to get some employee buy-in, take a look at your SWOT analysis, have them offer some guidance with that and fill in some of the terms that they say. And just take one item that's in a weakness column. It could be something as simple as that you don't have any new business opportunities, or maybe you have very limited social media. Whatever the case is, those are easy and measurable things that you can actually accomplish within a few weeks' time. So maybe you need to identify, hey, this is a job that I need to assign 2 hours to do a little bit of homework on LinkedIn. Have someone get familiar with that. Next thing you know, have them post once a day themselves and engage with other posts maybe twice a day. LinkedIn will just give you right back the results of how many people saw the post. You got to start to see some of those results right away. Same thing, it just sent a basic benchmark as, okay, I'm going to have one new customer per week that I'm going to send a proposal to. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the work, but you're going to engage somebody new. And that way, whenever you meet again, whether if it's weekly or monthly, you get a chance to say, this is where we are with this. And if you work as a team at just eliminating one item from the weakness column, and if you do it right, you put it in a strength column, you start to see results. When you cross lines out and you write them in other columns, it's activity and it's measurable on paper.
Okay, that's great. That's really good. Well, we do a SWOT analysis for the magazine each year, and it's yielded us a lot of success. Okay, Diana, in a time when it's difficult to find skilled and talented craft professionals, what does Wilkerson Crane Rental do to ensure you have the right employees and who are supporting your culture and your success?
Well, we are a union company, so we have to get really creative on finding people, because if you're a union company, you know you have to call the hall. So one thing that we've done is we've really gone out and we've targeted very specific operators, and to get them to kind of come over to our side, we've had to do things like pay above scale, pay to their like top certification that they are. We do a lot of things of promoting internally. We don't have your typical salesperson that most companies probably have. It's really important for us to have this person who was made in-house, so that they don't walk away with all your customers with just a better opportunity. So being able to try and promote internally is a huge thing for us, like offering safety bonuses. Again, knowing the families, like you had mentioned earlier, that's a huge thing for us, is just being a part of the families, the holiday parties. Just really, you have to feel, it's kind of weird, but really when we go to meet people or interview people, it's a feeling that we just get. There's sometimes somebody can be so qualified for something, but they just won't belong within your culture. Like, they have to be able to belong and understand where you've come from and where you're going. So just really internal has been a big thing for us. And we are, there's other things that I do to get involved to meet more people. I'm part of like the union negotiation boards. And so just trying to get things to change internally too, to help with employees. So.
Sandy, how do you address hiring in a time where there's really big worker shortages?
Thanks to COVID, I was hoping that one of you would answer that question for me, because I certainly don't have the answer. I don't think anyone here does. We're very blessed for the staff that we have. When I started with Stephan Industries, we had a labor staff with no titles. There was the boss, there was an office manager, and a project coordinator. What happened is the company was looked at as a stepping stone. It was never somewhere long term. You joined a crew, you did your work, and that was the end of it. Reviews were a joke. I've seen in people's old files that it was checked off that a review was completed, but there was no feedback. So just with redesigning the company, and this is just a suggestion, that doesn't matter how small your company is. It could be 3 people and up from there. Is just design an actual a matrix of your positions. And with that, assign job titles and position descriptions. Because what happens is when you really start to get into conversations with your staff about their own strengths and weaknesses and where they want to go, you learn very much about your staff, that they are capable of much more than you think they are. When it comes to the job title thing, what happens also is you realize that within those job descriptions, a lot of your staff has likely been performing some of those functions, but it's just been kind of willy-nilly and no one is recognizing them for it. When you have an actual job description that's appropriate, you also give yourself, as management of a company, the benchmark idea that you can measure their skill. Where are they at? Your reviews become useful. They become engaging. As you have expectations on paper, someone knows exactly what their education level needs to be or their experience level. They know what's expected of them. They know some of the skills that they're expected to achieve and the duties to perform. So as you review this with your employee, whether if it's 90 days or annually, you at least have an idea of what they're supposed to be doing, and you know if they're performing. So you can give positive feedback, which helps certainly make any criticism that you need to deliver a little bit easier to digest. It also gives you the opportunity to do the old paperwork somebody out the door policy also, if you have to. You might have a problematic employee, but you can't put your finger on what the issue is. But the job description and lack of being able to meet expectations can sometimes be your ticket to saving your team's morale. We now have a whole bevy. We have a fleet manager, we have operations manager, we have project manager, field project manager. What that's done is completely streamline all the communication. Everyone knows everyone's role. Our job descriptions have been shared with each other. Side note, I don't have a job description. I'm the only one. However, what it's really done is it's given a lot of direction to our customers. They know who to talk to. There's no longer one siloed person who is responsible for all the communication and controlling narratives. And it gives everyone an opportunity to take ownership of their job and make sure that they're doing the best that they can. Just a side story on why it's so important. I have one of my employees he's been with us for a few years, and he said, I would like to be able to get a raise. What can we do? And so I said, well, let's take a look at job descriptions here, what your experience is. Let's try to tailor what you're doing here every day in an actual direction. I want this to be a career path for you and for all of our staff. I don't want to train you and have you leave like is known to happen. I went through just 2 minutes with him on just what his skills and capabilities were. It turns out he's a huge technology fanatic. So it kind of worked in a couple ways. As number one, I have a staff who some still have flip phones, but that's what they like. I really needed to convert everybody to smartphones. Everyone has their own company email address and they're expected to use it. I was not up for the challenge of training all of our staff on how to use a smartphone though. But by identifying this person and setting that as a goal, he became the technology specialist, and he is now the liaison in the field if there's an issue with an app. Anything like that, he takes care of it. And I can tell you within a very short 3 months, the guys went from refusing to use smartphones in general to they're actually sending emails. It's amazing what the right person in the right position can do. What it also has done too, it helped my project managers be able to offload the responsibility of uploading hours for projects. That's something that just got set his way as well. He's embraced it. He has a laptop, he has a phone, and we talk often, and it's eliminated so many problems and just time sucks. So streamlining all those positions, even if you're a tiny company, it's still very important for a lot of reasons.
So hire from within sometimes. Okay, Kate, continuing on that same thought, how do you assure that your valued employee team that have been with you guys for years and years, some of them, how do you assure they stay in place and engaged?
So that's a really good question. We're very fortunate. We've had second and third generation families working with us. We have combinations of fathers, sons, daughters, and even granddaughters or grandsons working with us. I think one of the keys to our success there has been flexibility. As long as our employees are getting their hours in and getting their work done, we're flexible with what they do. If they're volunteering for their church or coaching Little League, as long as they're getting it done, we remain flexible with them. I would say too, leading by example. As the owners, you need to be there. You need to show up. You need to put in the time worked. Spend time with your employees, whether it's a hello in the morning or stopping by their office just to see how they're doing. Getting out into the shops, into the field, talking to your personnel out there, seeing how they're doing and what's going on in their lives. And then Diana touched on this a little bit. Employee appreciation events. Before the pandemic, we would do 2 events a year. We'd do one in June and one in December. 2 very different events. The December event was a Christmas party specifically for the employees and their spouses, and it's formal. In June, we do a barbecue where the entire family is invited, and it's a good time for everyone to dress down and kind of have fun together. I think that those are not only important events to thank your employees for their hard work and dedication, but also to thank their family members. In our industry, you've got people on the road for months at a time. They're away from their families. They're missing milestone events in some cases in their kids' lives. So I really think taking those opportunities to say thank you and give them accolades is very important.
Okay, we're going to wrap this up with one last question, and then I'm going to turn the questions over to the audience. I want to talk a little bit about social media, and I think one of you touched on it a little bit earlier. Diana, let's start with you. Do you have a social media policy? Do you encourage social media with your employees?
We do have some basic social media policies, but for what we do, we have a social media app is what we actually use internally, and it has been a huge thing for our company. It allows everybody to communicate wherever they're at. And it's kind of funny because even the guys, the different crane crews kind of get these little competitions going of who's like doing the best lift for that day or whatever. So just the photos that you get throughout the day, you're getting to see what they do. There's competitions, there's jokes. I feel like every time they go to a job, like if they're going to go out to Iowa, they might have never worked with this guy, but yet they have a sense that they still know them. They're like, oh yeah, I saw that job that you were on. So it's been helpful.
What is the app you use?
This one's a simple one. It's just GroupMe, and you just can create different groups within it. It's a free app even, and we've created different levels of it. So we have the safety group. Therefore all of your like toolbox talks and things like that, we can send them out. Just keeping people up to date. If there's, it keeps the office also as part of, the office with the crew out, right. Because they can say, oh, well, I know who this person is I need this, or you can tell them your payroll updates, or, it just allows people, I think, to know each other. And so that way when they actually see each other, it's not awkward. They don't feel like they can't call the office or they can't talk to somebody because there's just always communication going around all day. So.
Kate, what about you guys? Do you have a social media policy?
We do, yes. It was born out of the emergence of smartphones and platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook. We have a strict policy. We asked our employees to keep their social media to their personal time. Do it on your lunch hours, do it on your breaks. If you're one of those people that glued to your phone, keep it in your car, keep it in your lunchbox. I think the biggest is in our industry is a safety concern. The last thing you want are people out there that are taking pictures while operating equipment and posting it. It reflects poorly on the company and could upset the customer. So I think the employees and the company needs to be aware too of personal versus professional. We might give you a tool like a cell phone to do your job, and we expect you to use it accordingly. If you abuse it and you're posting personal information on company time, then that's a conversation we'll have.
What about you guys, Sandy?
I have a little bit of a different take on social media. I understand how valuable it can be that your employees can promote your company from within, especially younger generations, things like Snapchat. One thing as an employer you want to be mindful of, though, what your employees are sharing. That's very important just from a safety perspective. If you happen to find a picture of your company or a job site on one of the Facebook groups, it's OSHA fails, whatever they're called, and you know one of your staff posted that, it's probably not a good team member to have with your crew in the first place. That should not be a safety issue to begin with if they're doing their jobs. However, what it can also do is showcase the really just amazing, complicated work that your staff is capable of performing, and also gives them a chance to show how proud they are of the work that they do. From the legal perspective, one of the things that we learned with social media, just being involved in an unfortunate lawsuit, is what others posted ended up being quite useful. It would demonstrate where certain people were at certain times versus what they had on their calendar, and they had already claimed where they were. It also, when you take pictures with your smartphone, if you have Google turned on, Google embeds the longitude and latitude of all of those photos. So if someone does try to claim that they were somewhere that they're not, that photo can show exactly where they were. It became very useful, completely innocently, of someone posting just to Facebook. They were proud of the work they were doing. They were excited to be there that day. Just fun pictures of their coworkers. As innocent as those were, though, it proved a lot of just the gut feelings that we had, things that we knew we were having a hard time proving. It put the people in the places that we needed to have and was very helpful.
So, Kate, back to your policy. So I know you guys use LinkedIn. I know you use social media as part of your marketing efforts. So what do you control that through your offices?
We do, and to be honest with you, we were on a number of platforms. We've removed ourselves from a few of those in the last year and a half, but primarily LinkedIn because we found it was the best platform for us from a business perspective. Mm-hmm. But we do monitor it regularly, and even though the company's not on Facebook anymore, we still pay attention.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot to navigate these days, that's for sure. Okay. This is a really engaging group of young women. Shared a whole lot of good information in a short amount of time. There's lots to digest, lots to ponder. But we have a few more minutes, so do any of you all have questions?
We do have a mic, so hold on.
So as women in a primarily male-dominated industry, has that ever been a challenge? Have you ever encountered any issues with that, and how did you handle it?
Let's let the group go there. The answer is yes. I think that growing up in the industry, people I've noticed don't expect women to be very knowledgeable about the construction industry. So I made an effort early on to make sure that I know what our products and services are, to know who our customers are, to understand the emerging technologies and products that are being offered and whether or not those make sense for our fleet. I also think that a stigma still exists in the industry that women aren't as smart or as strong as men are. I do see that changing, and I do feel that some men out there are pleasantly surprised by the tenacity and the caliber of women in this industry today.
Okay, I'll take it. The answer is definitely yes. My previous life, my career was in social services, and it was primarily dominated by women. So coming into this field, I certainly wasn't I wasn't afraid. I was kind of raised in a weld shop, so that had no issue for me. What I encountered is knowing the demographic of this industry. I knew it would be a bit of a struggle. It is primarily male dominated. One of the great conversations I had, and the reason why I'm here, I'm very new to the SC&RA as well as being very new to the industry itself. I had let our membership lapse. I had no idea at the time what SC&RA could provide for us, and Jason did a follow-up call and said, hey, you guys let your membership lapse. Anything we can do to explain? And what I would typically say, please remove me from your calling list, turned into a very engaging conversation that Jason really acted on everything he said he was going to do. One of the keys of our conversation is, as he was talking to me about a lot of the things that the SC&RA does, I was going along on the website and I came right out and said, all I see are white males here. Where do I fit in as a female? And he said, I completely understand. We hear this often. He said, and I'm going to connect you with Rebecca Quinn because there is a very big push now that, the industry has to recognize that women, they shouldn't be stuck in these positions working for family companies with a catch-all title like office manager. Typically, they really perform some executive level functions, but women have just been shoved into these administrative roles, but they are so much more capable of so much more. And I can tell you just how I've been welcomed being so new these last couple of days has been great. And thank you all for being here. So that tells me that Jason wasn't just giving me lip service, it was true. You all knew that there would be women presenters here, and you're here to listen to what we have to say and give us your time. I think that speaks volumes.
For me, I haven't had that many struggles, really. I've dealt with a few people that I don't think that you could change their mind regardless. Like, it just doesn't matter. So you can't really dwell on those people. But I will say mainly what I get in the industry is, obviously because I'm married to Jeff, who is a huge part in the company. It's always, everybody goes to him to say, oh, well, what did you do in the company? And so it's kind of like a surprise that I'm there, I think, sometimes for people. But that's really, I think, been the biggest challenge, is trying to define myself. But at the same time, it doesn't really bother me. Like I said, I've been around male industry stuff since I was little. I literally got kicked out of shop class. The guy came up to me, my shop teacher said, you need to leave. You need to go take home ec. And I am still a terrible cook, so that didn't work either. But I didn't leave. But I'm a terrible cook. So I mean, at the end of the day, I knew what I was getting into when I came into this. So I just choose to really just go after and talk to the people who care, and instead of focus on the ones that want to be negative. So.
Well, I can tell you from my perspective, and I've been in this industry now 16 years, and a whole lot before that as the wife of a crane salesman. You do get a few issues occasionally. You will have someone say something rude or try to demean you and not know what, let you know you don't know what you're talking about, and sometimes you don't. But I will say this is a very kind and respectful industry, and you guys are getting it. You're understanding that, women are going to be a big part of this industry, and they're going to do all the things, maybe not, in the traditional sense. But anyway, do we have any more questions? Okay. I don't think I see any.
Follow up on yours. It's kind of funny because I think one of the biggest questions that people always try to challenge me with is, well, what crane would you put on this job? And I'm like, well, what insurance policy are you going to have? What, did you read your contract? What about your OSHA stuff? So there's a lot of things, and I just turn around and like to tell them, well, I'm going to sell you the biggest crane I have if I'm selling it. So it's like, there's more than one side to the business. And, so I think it's always interesting to see what people think. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I would like you to give a round of applause. It may not seem like it, but it takes a lot of guts to get up here and talk about things like this. Okay, let's take a quick break to stretch our legs, and we're going to head into the last session of the workshop. Once again, we'll regroup in Regency AB at 4:30.